All right, my apologies. Didn't I say that I would never start a meeting late after that, didn't I? I haven't started a meeting on time since I said that. So this is a special meeting of council open Monday, December 17th at 2 p.m., 2:10, excuse me. Call to order. Just before I do, I'd just like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. With that, may I get an approval of today's agenda? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Jensen. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. There's one piece of business, and this is regarding the RCMP Detachment building budget of 2018 to 19. Really quickly, that the 2018 to 2022 financial plan approval did not include consideration of new furniture for the RCMP detachment. Colwood's share of the expenditure would be approximately $50,000. I am to advise that I'm suggesting that we should possibly move forward with this furniture order, and it should not have a direct impact on Colwood taxation, but it will result in inadequate police building reserve fund availability for the 2019 capital budget request. With that, there is the report, but we also have our Director of Finance and the Inspector from the RCMP to answer any questions. So I will turn it over to Council. Beforehand, Selena, can I just, before discussion, and before anybody asks questions, should we always be having a motion? Should I ask for a motion before I ask for discussion, or is it okay to do discussion and then look for a motion? Okay, so I will do it that. Thank you. So moved by Councillor Jensen, seconded by Councillor Logan. Then I will go to, and I'm assuming you're going with the motion that's recommended. Thank you. With that, discussion. Councillor Kobayashi.
This really doesn't, it sort of has to do with this, but what the question I have for our Director of Finance is, I think it would be really good for us to be educated as a council as far as how the whole budget is done for the RCMP. I would understand there would be a capital budget and an operating budget. And so I guess I just wanted to understand the dynamics and the formulas and how this is all put together. I think it's a reasonable thing. It's just so that we understand it a lot better. So it doesn't have anything to do with the motion itself, but I think it'd be really good if we had that.
Sure. I will. I'll just look to our Director of Finance. Do you want to, just for the benefit of the new councillors, would you like to just sort of explain our budgetary process and how the RCMP budget would fit into our deliberations on round budget?
Yes, thank you, through your worship. So two main components to our policing budget, I'll refer to it. The RCMP contract is based solely on the strength that's requested from council, which is currently 16.6. The building, however, is a different allocation formula, split between View Royal and the city of Langford. And that's based on, half of it is based on population, half of it is based on our assessed value. So that's evaluated every year. And the police building operating costs are split according to those allocations. Thank you.
Councillor Kobayashi, does that answer? Or do you have any follow-up?
Okay. Yes, I do. So, like, I noticed that some of the things in the capital budget for 2019, I'm just trying to governmentize myself here right now because I'm so used to working in private industry. So things like repairs, like HVAC repair would, like normally in my business, it would be an operating expense rather than a capital expense. So, so do we separate it that way, or anything to do with the building is considered capital? Is that how it works?
Through your worship, no. So we actually define operating versus capital using accounting standards. There is an ongoing operating budget submitted to us by the city of Langford for operating costs, And generally, the lease revenue on that property, which currently is in dispute by the RCMP, offset the operating costs. The capital portion of the building, and HVAC is significant enough to be considered capital under accounting standards, is a separate budget request, which the contract between the municipal owners requires to be submitted to us by November 30th annually. So what we would really like to move towards as a landlord committee is 5-year capital budgeting rather than this bring forward 1 year of capital, hoping that we have reserves for it, finding alternate funding sources. We want to have a 5-year plan before all of our councils and all of our municipal members so that there's a bit of certainty in that budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, sorry. Yep, go ahead.
Just one last question. So every year, how do we determine what our allocation for the capital budget, how do we do that?
Through your worships, the allocation is the same as the operating budget. So anything to do with the building would be based 50% on assessed value and 50% based on population.
Oh, okay. So
And the population is based on CRD projections.
Okay. I have one question for you. So if this motion passes this afternoon, it will result in an adequate police building reserve fund for 2019. My notes say. So what is the plan? Is the plan that are we planning on topping that up in 2019, or is that going to get pushed towards 2020 budget? Or
Thank you, Your Worship, for asking that question. I was going to actually propose an additional resolution today if council is inclined to allocate the surplus funds, if any, from the RCMP contract be allocated to the building reserve so that we would have adequate budget for 2019 and additional couple years as well. There are other funding sources we could use, city reserves, but these are most related to RCMP and the provision of policing services.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other further questions, I'm going to call. Oh, sorry, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I do have some concerns, and my concerns are related to the way the budgeting has been done up till this point. The council has previously identified concerns for the long-term planning. We've had issues come up before with last-minute requests for even a change of allocation of funds. We have accumulated the surplus that we are contemplating using for this purpose through the inability at times to provide full staffing levels. No fault intended, only because they've been seconded elsewhere, or when officers have not been able to be acquired for the full complement that we've requested. I just am very concerned that we would, at this late date in the budget cycle, have this just come out of the blue, as it were. We've been talking about the third floor at the RCMP building since I was first elected back in 2002. So to have reached a point where we're at, December 17th, and we're saying, oh, by the way, we didn't budget for furniture for this space, seems to me to be a less than fully productive way to be budgeting. And my concern going forward with doing this is that we've had other requests that have come forward in the past, and we've had issues with understanding the full RCMP budget, and we've asked that that budget be presented to us in a way so that we can plan appropriately for the future. So I do have difficulty. I want the building to be used appropriately. I want the RCMP to have the resources that they need to do the work. But at the same time, I expect that in a professional relationship that we have, this would not be handled in this way.
Anyone else? Ben,
Just further to your comment, my understanding and looking into this personally, that this is left over from it was missed by a previous officer in charge, and I think that the current commander is doing his best to put the genie back in the bottle here for us. So I think the fault doesn't lie with the current administration, is my understanding.
thank you. Anything else from anyone? Councilor Perkins?
Sorry. I notice in the 2019 to 23 capital expenditures, we have 2019 capital expenses, and under carpeting is unknown. So although the total comes to 179, it's obviously different than that. Are we talking of a little carpeting or a lot of carpeting? Like what about an estimate for what that number might be?
Thank you. Right. Thank you, through your worship. Order in magnitude, we can expect the carpeting to be no more than $20,000, of which our share would be $5,000 to $6,000.
Councilor Logan?
Thank you, Worship. I just want to add a comment to say that the West Shore RCMP has always been very good at holding out on their requests until the very last moment when the need is really exceptional, and how we've come to this point where we haven't had to expand to the third floor has been a miracle, given the amount of growth that the West Shore has undertaken. So, I do appreciate the work that West Shore has done to try to keep the costs down and to try to minimize the impact of these additional costs on our member municipalities. So I appreciate the restraint, and I have absolutely no issue with approving this. And I also do appreciate finance's eye on the ball here as well in looking at some future needs and saving for them, like has been the pattern that's been established. So I do appreciate the work that both departments have put into this, and I'll leave it at that. I'm supportive. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilor Day?
Sorry, just one point of clarification. I forgot to ask when the apportionment of the cost was mentioned. It was stated that it was half based on the assessed value and half based on population, and that the population numbers that were used were from the CRD. So the population numbers that are used, that's for the future population or for the current population?
Through your worship, as you're aware, there's, I believe, 4-year time difference between census. So in between a census, the CRD will project what the population is that year, and that's the information that's used, that I was referring to.
Okay, thank you. Just my concern was that the CRD population estimates are fatally flawed, and at least the assessed value we know is a current situation, and so. But if it's only within the 4-year cycle, I guess I can live with that.
Seeing nobody else's hand, I am going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Then our Director of Finance had a suggestion for a second motion. I will look to him to perhaps read it out, and then if anyone concurs, they could move it.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The resolution would be that Council directs staff to allocate surplus funds from the 2018 through 2019 RCMP contract to the Police Building Reserve.
So moved. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Questions or discussion, excuse me, Councillor Day?
Thank you. My only concern with this is that this is rather prescriptive, that we're allocating the surplus, that we have been allocating RCMP surpluses to our reserve fund, and I appreciate that that the building reserve fund, I think, is different from the RCMP reserve fund that we have set up. So I would prefer to see our surplus go to our reserve fund that we have identified, and that the specific uses for that reserve fund be allocated at a later date.
Are you making that as an amendment to the motion, or are you?
I believe that is contrary to the motion and therefore could not be an amendment.
Okay. Councillor Parkinson?
How much money are we talking about?
Very difficult to predict, but I'm predicting between a minimum $200,000 RCMP contract surplus for this fiscal year.
Councillor Parkinson as a follow-up, and then Councillor Jensen.
Well, I think while I'm still working my way around municipal finances, I think I'd agree with Councillor Day on this one, that if it's a surplus from underspending in an area, it should probably go into the general pot, and reserves should be allocated, on an as required and as understood basis, rather than just putting it in a pot that's therefore dedicated to one purpose only.
Okay. Councillor Jensen?
My question was, of that 200K, is that all of it going into this building reserve fund, or is there a scenario where it gets divvied up? If we're only using a certain amount, we need to put a certain amount back in, or is this for this one-off year, or is this in perpetuity, or?
Through your worship, council has a choice if they would like to divvy it up, absolutely. Showing my cards for your sustainable infrastructure plan, I've got some recommendations about how we could possibly fund the replacement of the building using contract surplus funds. So the discussion will come up very shortly in the new year about a consistent policy. This request is for a one-time transfer, but we will discuss a consistent policy very shortly.
And just as a clarification, oh, go ahead. You guys can finish. Then I'll ask. So just as a clarification, so this motion, motion one, we allocated $50,000. So I just want to clarify that this second motion would just be transferring that $50,000 that we allocated already to this fund, or are you talking about the whole $200,000?
Through your worship, no. The first motion was to spend the money. Go ahead, use our police building reserve to spend your money. The second motion is we're going to spend less than we thought we would from the RCME contract. Let's take those funds and move them into the building reserve.
Thank you. Any other discussion before I call the question? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Please, the motion passes. Please note that Councillor Parkinson, Councillor Baxter, Councillor Day opposed. I need a motion to go in camera. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Baxter, second by Councillor Logan. And we need to give it a minute because Marcy needs to go for a run for some